So, hi everybody. I hope this finds you safe and well. My name's John El-Mokadem, and I'm honoured to have been asked to be one of the speakers at this year's annual Viva event. This is going to be taking place virtually between the 23rd and 26th of October. And for those of you that don't know what that is, so the Viva event is a place to come and explore the teachings and the understandings known as the three principles, which were first sort of brought to the world by the philosopher Sydney Banks. And what I wanted to do today was to share a little video with you guys, to share a bit about what I've seen personally about this understanding and why it seems to me that this understanding is more and more relevant than ever. Now, why is that? Well, if you look at the world we're in, it's increasingly uncertain. And, things that many of us used to hang our hat on to find our certainty and our well-being are changing quite rapidly. And many of the people that I speak to are becoming quite unsettled by that. And some are struggling to find a level of well-being in such a changing and uncertain world. And in addition, they are finding themselves needing to become more creative to try and navigate changing circumstances. Some are losing jobs or their businesses aren't doing as well as they might have done before. And so there's this need for us to kind of respond differently to the world that we find ourselves in. And some of the people I'm speaking to are finding that opportunities are looking scarce. Um, and it seems to me to be more important than ever for us to have a truer connection to a sense of freedom, well-being, health, resilience, creativity, amongst other things. And so I thought it could be cool to share a video with you guys about how this understanding can point us more towards truth about those things. And hopefully you'll find it interesting. And if you do, you might want to come and find out a bit more about the Viva event, the details of which will hopefully, if I get this right, be found in the description beneath this video here. So I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, so what is it that I could usefully share with somebody who may never have kind of heard anything about this understanding? And I was thinking about one of Sydney Banks's most famous quotes, and one which for me seems to sum up a big part of the essence of his work. And the quote is simply this: if the only thing that people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. Now, it strikes me that there are so many levels on which this quote is relevant. Um, when you think about, let's take for example our sense of well-being and our how okay we feel about ourselves in the world. Now, many of us, myself included, before I learned about this understanding, we really think that our sense of well-being and how okay and at peace we feel is a function of the changing or of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, right? So we kind of make up, well, if life is like this, then I'll be okay. But the problem is, as I said, we're living in this world where our circumstances are changing. And as a result, people are feeling very unsettled. And the temptation when you think that your experience of life and your sense of well-being is coming from the outside, the temptation is to try and cling on to things, right? To try and cling on to what you know and to try and control your environment as a way of trying to regain our footing and regain our sense of balance and okayness. But as many of us are finding, this is increasingly difficult, and if it really looks like that sense of well-being is coming from outside, then many of us are going to keep struggling because it may not be that we can, make life look the way we think it should or the way it was once before in order to be okay. And we could really suffer as a result. Now, fortunately, and this is one of the key things that I learned about this understanding, this is not how things really work. I know it looks that way. But one of the things I came to see very on in my exploration of the principles was that contrary to what we think, our experience of life is not coming from what happens. And I know that could sound like quite a strong statement, but if you go and look, you'll see on some level that that's true. I remember when I was first introduced to this concept, and, pretty soon after hearing it, I found myself on a roller coaster with my family. And it wasn't lost on me that and I hate these things, by the way, I really don't like roller coasters. But I found myself on one of these things, and I was with my sort of wife and two kids, and I was just basically screaming in fear for my life, certain that I was about to meet my maker at some point very soon whilst I was on this ride. And yet here I was, and I was looking at my son whilst he was going around this thing. He was really young at the time. He must have been, I don't know, 5, 6, something like that. And that tells you something about the degree of this roller coaster. We're not talking about some big, massive thing. It was probably a baby one. But here he was going around it with his arms up in the air, laughing and screaming with enjoyment, whilst I was having a completely different experience of the same thing, right? So, same circumstances, completely different experience. Now, how do we reconcile that? Well, part of how we reconcile that is through seeing that actually the medium that gives us that experience is not the circumstance itself, but thought, right? So every single human being is walking around in a separate reality of similar circumstances that is created through them through this gift of us thinking, right? Now, okay, good to know, because it kind of means that we don't need to change our experience or change our circumstances to have well-being. But how does this information really help? Well, I thought I'd tell you a little story to sort of give you a feel for how that might work. And I was thinking back to sort of probably 5 years ago now, when I moved house, and we moved to a completely different town. So we used to live in London, and we had a nice little house, and we had neighbours that we liked, and the kids were happy in their schools, and we got to a point where we realised that we needed to move somewhere bigger. And it was partly, so that we could have Linda's family, my wife's family, come and live with us, her mum and dad. And so we found this place in a completely different town. We didn't know anybody there, and it was going to be a building project, which I've never done before. And I remember distinctly the first day we moved into this rented house whilst we were doing the construction work, and we got there sort of at night, and then the next morning we woke up and we came down to this deluge of boxes in this rented house. And I remember my wife and I just looked at each other and we cried. And it was like, oh my God, what have we done? We've left this nice place that we lived. We had friends there, we had family close by. Here we are in this strange town with a building project to do, and the kids have got new school, and there's all these boxes and all this crazy stuff going on. And the two of us was just like, oh my gosh, what have we done? Now, I remember at the time suddenly having this understanding kick in me, and I realized, oh, okay, I guess my mind is really upset about the circumstances that we're in. It's really making up that we were okay where we were, and because where we are now looks really different, it doesn't like it. And so I'm having this experience of discomfort and sadness and frustration. Now, it would have been very easy back then to go, my gosh, we've made a mistake, we need to move back, right? We need to go back to where we were. But that isn't what happened. I remember us just kind of giving each other a hug and going, yeah, I guess it's going to be bumpy for a bit. Right now, what that means is that I knew that it was going to take time, because I understood more about the nature of thought, which is more about what this understanding helps us see. I started to see, well, my mind and my thinking haven't caught up to where I'm at. So for now, I'm going to have this experience of discomfort. But what's different is that the experience is not going to have me, right? I'm not going to feel like I need to do anything about it, because I understand that the nature of my thinking mind is that thought changes, thought settles. Human beings are built to adapt to new environments as their minds settle, right? So just the simple understanding that all that was going on in my experience in that moment was that my mind had not caught up to where I was, meant that I could now have an experience of feeling discomfort, but a lot of freedom around it, because a lot of what takes us away from the freedom is all the things we do to try and fix our experience, right? So I realized I didn't need to be afraid of this experience and that ultimately it would pass. And that's exactly what happened. Over the course of the weeks and months, I found myself not lamenting so much where I lived and starting to call where I lived home, even with building work, even with new schools and new challenges. After a while, that started to happen. And I've noticed the same as we've been through lockdown as well. I'm pretty sure there's not a human being on this planet who went into 2020 thinking, yeah, this is what I'm going to do in 2020 given the coronavirus lockdown and a pandemic. Pretty sure most of us didn't know this was coming. And I don't want to get into any of these conspiracy theories or anything like that. Like most of us had no idea. Now, me too. And as I went into lockdown, I noticed that we were in a bit of a mess. Like we weren't very happy and everyone had these expectations that had not been met. But it was the same thing. As the lockdown passed and time passed and we understood what was going on in our minds, eventually, 6 weeks in, I was kind of okay being locked at home. Now, it was not a preference, but I was no longer thinking I need for this to go in order for me to be okay, because I was finding more and more that I was okay, that my mind had settled into what was, and I was now okay. And it was the same for the rest of my family. Now, this is hugely invaluable because you think about how much human beings are doing to try and find that well-being, not realizing that their experience comes from thought and that thought is designed to settle. Right? We're never far from what we're looking for. So that means we don't have to scrabble around and fix our circumstances to be okay. Now, there's another great benefit to that, which I thought I would just speak briefly to, which is the more we realize that actually we are built to adapt to any circumstance, actually opens the door for us to see a lot more opportunities, right? So again, it's a conversation I've been having a lot of with my own clients, which is that they are finding themselves in these situations where they go, well, what do I do? My business is not working the way it was, or I now need to change the way I behave given the circumstances I'm in, but I don't see any options. Where are my options? Now, what's stopping them from seeing options is the degree to which they're reconciled to how their experience really works, right? So the more we reconcile, or the more we understand that our experience is something that settles, then actually, when we start to consider making changes in our life and, looking for new things to solve problems we've got, the more we understand that our experience settles and is transient and that we're walking around in the well-being we look for, actually we now see more options on the table, right? You probably heard the phrase, think outside the box. Well, if you think about what the box is basically made up of where we think the limits of our experience are, right? So if we think, well, I'm okay with doing things within the limits of these experiences, but if I do something there, oh, I'll have a horrible experience and I won't cope with that. Well, now we won't look outside the box. But the more we see that all experiences are safe and are made of thought, and that human beings are built to adapt and are inherently resilient, well, now when we face challenging circumstances, we may still have this made up box of what we think we need to be okay, but the slightest bit of suspicion about our ability to be resilient in the face of changing experience, well, now we can look outside, right? Because we sort of know that even if we have to do something that's outside our made up box, the more we understand how the box works, the more we see, well, maybe I can adapt to that. Maybe my experience will settle, even if I have to do that thing that right now looks uncomfortable. And I was thinking about this again over lockdown, and I was seeing these great stories of pilots at airlines going and taking jobs at, delivering Ocado and, Asda deliveries and shopping and that sort of thing. And I was thinking, gosh, that's probably not easy to go from doing a kind of job like that to doing this. Very different pay, different skill set, different things to do. But amazing to think that actually human beings can do that when they get how their experience works. So this understanding is something that's not only useful in terms of pointing us to just how innately resilient and healthy we are, but it's hugely practical. It helps us see things that are on the table that we might not have seen before, right? So I wanted to say, just to put that on the table, and there's so much more I could say, but I could rattle on for hours and hours. And one of the other things that's been key for me is seeing that actually this understanding has can have the potential to have a massive effect on our health. And a big part of my journey in understanding the principles was actually a healing journey and recovering from a chronic illness over 7 years. Now, I'm not going to say too much about that, but if you're interested, then you might want to come and join us at I think it's called the Touch of Viva event, where some of the speakers are going to be speaking about their experiences, and I'm going to be talking about my health journey. So that's going to be happening on the 6th, which I think is Thursday this week, 6th of August. And again, details of that are in the video or in the description below. So I hope that's a bit of interest to you guys, and I hope I'll get to see some of you on the online Viva conference. And in the meantime, I hope you have a nice day and take care. Lots of love. Bye.